Um, Here's a tweet you put out the other day. Rarely has been buying a home been this expensive in America. I mentioned already, 1981, we had a similar peak, and that's when mortgage rates were bananas, right? 18%. The second was right before the housing crash. Um, we have this similar amount of unaffordability today. Um, and obviously it asks the question, is this presaging another housing crash? Well, we'll get to that in a bit. But what's contributing to this unaffordability, I think you said something like on average, it requires like 40% of gross income to buy a home
Yep.
today for the average buyer,
Yep.
which is huge, right? Um, it's not just the price of the house, right? Now, mortgage rates have gone back up relative to their average over the past decade or so, right? So, they're relatively more expensive, or certainly relatively more expensive than they were during, say, the COVID era. Um, but with the inflation spike we've seen, the costs of home ownership have skyrocketed. It may be to the point, well, I guess to where it's, right up there in one of the most unaffordable periods we've ever had. It's not just paying the mortgage, it's paying the property taxes, it's paying insurance, obviously. And we've heard horror stories about people's insurance going up by double digits, in some cases doubling or tripling in certain markets, especially if you live in markets that have been getting hit by a lot of extreme weather now, and the insurance companies are just jacking the rates through the roof. It's also repairs and maintenance. We're hearing an increasing amount of reports that people have just stopped doing a lot of basic maintenance on their house because they can't afford it anymore. I should note too that I think the average age, or the age of the average house in America, is something like 40 plus years. So we have this sort of aging fleet of homes that people are not paying to upkeep. And it's going to be interesting to see what issues that might create a decade or two down the road. But housing has almost never been this unaffordable. Um, how much of a role is that playing here of just, hey, people are just saying, I literally would like to be a home buyer. I just can't afford it under these circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. Because one thing people should remember, right, is that when you buy a house, yeah, you have your mortgage interest, but you also have your property tax payment. You have your property insurance payment. In Florida, where I live, you have your HOA fees in a lot of
Mhm.
places. These are ongoing costs that are not capped or fixed. They often continue to go up, right? And so that's causing a lot of issues for a lot of homeowners across America and would-be home buyers, is the costs of ownership on an ongoing basis, right? So you correctly pointed out, you have the upfront burden, right, of the down payment and the price, and then, calculating what your monthly payment's going to be. But then you have the ongoing burden of seeing those costs increase. And I think for a lot of people, it's just not worth it. Now, the thing that's driving this, though, is prices, right? Higher prices drives taxes up. Higher prices drives insurance costs up. So it all comes back to prices in the end. Prices are too high in this housing market. They've actually never been even close to this high. So the graph you showed was showing house payments relative to income. But the graph I'm going to show you now is home prices adjusted for inflation going back almost 140 years. And I think this graph really tells you a lot about what is going on in the housing market.